Welcome back. I've just been ordering some injection parts for the engine. I'm going for a methanol and water injection setup, or parts from that kind of setup. So the injection nozzle from said setup and the lines and stuff. I'm going to try a normal Bosch 044 fuel pump first and see, because people say it can handle methanol. Bosch does not approve of it, but I've heard about people running it for 2-3 years without problems. So I'm gonna try that first, run it with PWM. I replied to a comment here saying I was going to try a solenoid valve, a fast solenoid valve. I don't think that's necessary, because that's used to keep high pressure all the time, and also to have fast control over changing fuel or methanol water injection demands. I don't need that. I'm going to run at a constant RPM, constant throttle opening, constant load scenario, so there won't be any change. The only change will be varying weather conditions, but they're not that quick. I might add in some like temperature adjustment during a run, but even that's not that fast. It would require because the thing with a valve is that it can change like the injection rate rapidly, or the flow. The pump has some inertia to it, and thereby it's not that fast, because if you change the input voltage or the input frequency, the duty cycle of the frequency, the on time, there will be a lag there because of the inertia. So we won't spool down or spool up as fast as just using a valve, constant pressure and a valve to control it. But I don't need that. So I'm starting out with PWM directly onto the pump and control it that way. I won't keep, or if I size the nozzles, the injectors correctly, I can keep a very high pressure and good atomization. But even at lower atomization, I think that's what it's called, I don't think I will have a problem, because I'm injecting into the intake almost directly onto the crank, and that's spinning at 19,000 RPM, and will do a pretty good job of atomizing fuel that hasn't been properly atomized out of the nozzle. Atomized. It's not really atomization, it's making small droplets. Anyways, I thought I'd use this video to answer comments, but things are happening. I've contacted Kai Wheeler about sorry, I'm a bit I have a cold. Medicine. Yeah, I've contacted Kai Wheeler, added him to my Fusion project, so he can have a look at the case and see if it's machinable with his machine. It is a 3-axis CNC mill lathe, home built. That's kind of that's the main reason for why I'm like, there's been a lot of people offering to do this on their CNC machines, but none of them have built the machine themselves, I think. But Kai Wheeler has, so that's like, he offered, and I would really like him to do it on his homemade machine, because that's really cool. Anyways, I'll reply to some comments here, because I'm reading through them anyway, so why not do a little video where I reply on screen. Also, I think many people would like that, and it's easier to give a good reply verbally than writing, or at least faster. Let's see here. And this time also there's a lot of comments like great video, nice and sweet, so nice. So I really appreciate those replies. Thanks guys, but I can't really reply to them other than saying thanks, thank you. So here we go. What about rotary valve injector? Just like a rotary valve intake valve, but smaller and just for fuel only. Gear driven directly from the crankshaft. That's a great idea. I don't need that, because there's just a single RPM point, kind of, or a very tiny RPM range, constant load because of the variator, and constant throttle opening. So I don't really need control over the injectors, except for tuning them in before like set them at the right point and just set it and forget it. With some weather correction, set it and forget it. Coldy Woody says those carbs are for the Yamaha KT100 normally. It should provide more than enough fuel and air to get you to RPM. Yeah, I hope so, and I think so. 24 millimeters should be plenty for doing that. How do you manage primary compression with an open intake? I don't rely on primary compression. I rely on resonance, pulses from the exhaust, driving, and the intake in this setup. Normally I make the intake as short as possible to avoid the pulses screwing up parts of the RPM range. This time I'm making it long enough to have the primary, or the first resonant frequency, like the primary resonance of the intake, help in filling the crankcase. So together with the exhaust sucking hard on on the crankcase at bottom dead center, the intake is pushing hard on the crankcase at bottom dead center. It's really beautiful. In simulations there's a sine wave, perfect sine wave, almost perfect sine wave going through the crankcase and the intake at the right RPM. So beautiful, just beautiful. That's kind of part of the why I'm doing it also, because it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Like there's less things screwing with the resonance in the engine. Coldy Woody is also asking, have you looked at how the new Arctic Cat 8000 series C-Tech 2 engine has its injectors? And I think they're injecting into the C port, and that's also how, or KTM also does that by injecting downstream or against the flow into the transfers. And that's actually an idea Neil from New Zealand, Fletner, Uniflow, many names on different forums. That's his idea. He did that first and it works great, but as I'm not relying on injecting when the transfers are transferring mixture, I'm just like a carburetor, I'm continuously injecting. All the air that's coming into the engine is also bringing fuel. I don't need that kind of setup, but it's a great setup, and thanks Cole for sharing that. How are you going to keep the reed valve closed when the fuel injection is running? If it opens, it doesn't really matter. It will just inject some air and gas with it at the right mixture, not a problem. But I don't think it will, because there's a big gaping hole, and it's much easier, as like the primary intake, big gaping hole, it's much easier for air to go through there than to open the reed valve and go through there. But if it does, no problem. Drinking whiskey from a laboratory beaker instead of a shot glass means it's scientific research. Absolutely. That's a great comment. Oh, I should say the names of people here. So that's oh, I should get some glasses. Total Nutter, no, Total Letter Nutter. Great comment, Total Letter Nutter. I'll just read the replies here. Manu42, he's not drinking the whiskey, he's testing it, obviously. That's one thing I love with this channel, always whiskey. So that's Mr. Olsen. Always whiskey and rum in a laboratory cup nearby when the hard problems should be explained. Yeah, it's a concept. It's a solution. His whiskey mix is 20-1. 20 parts whiskey, 1 part air. Yeah, that's... Yeah. Lafroig suits the environment in which it is consumed, very smoky. Yeah, it is really smoky. I actually prefer Lagavulin to Lafroig. It's like thicker, feels thicker, more oily. Lafroig is more thin, but yeah, it's great, better than most whiskies. Too much shit to go wrong, man. Yeah, can't help it. It has to be experimental for me. That's like the driving force behind all this. I can't do something normal, or I can, but it's boring. So it has to be experimental. It has to be more than one thing. It has to be, yeah, that's just how the way I do things. But I will try to like test the new cylinder on the engine without opening that big intake, just on gas first, and I'll try to make things a bit more scientific, my approach. I like the scientific approach, but I seldom use it. And yeah, a lot of things to say about that. Someone is Scott Squires is suggesting I should get a Tillston carb, pumper carb, and yeah, they're better. So are the IBS, even better than the Tillston carbs. But I don't need a good carb. I just need a carb that works. I can get it adjusted, because it's not meant for the power making part of this. It's just meant for starting and bringing it up to RPM. So that's why. And like this Volbro carb is just, it's small, short, it's perfect for the application. It's not in the way. Matej Ogrinek suggesting I should switch over from Fusion to Inventor, because Inventor is better. Fusion is the younger brother of Inventor. Yeah, that's probably right. But I'm so used to Fusion, and it's free and it works for me. I have no problem with it. I think it works. There's some bugs there, like when the model gets really complicated, and that's maybe one of the main things with Inventor, handling complicated big models or bodies. Like with the cylinder, things get like really buggy, and so like everything checks out, everything is fine. If you do a compute all, then there's a lot of errors there, even though they're not really there. But like Fusion can't handle it, it seems. What speed was the fastest ever recorded 50cc bike? Fastest ever, that's like 235 kilometers an hour. In the class we're entering, the speed limit or the record is almost 90 miles per hour. That's in the fuel class. Actually, the gas class is higher. It's 91 point something. But so we're entering the fuel class because we can run methanol and nitromethane. And if things go like work as they're supposed to do now, we should crush that record. Yeah. Okay, Carburetor Rembus says something in a language I can't read. Sorry, man. It got 2 likes, so maybe could be some shit, could be a good comment. William Jensen says in the US you would probably have been offered a job as an engineer at an engine performance company. It's a shame that there isn't that big of a culture with motoring here in Norway, except the yearly AMCAR meets. Yeah, thank you for thinking I like that my knowledge and stuff is good enough for something like that. I'm not sure if I would like to work at such a place either way, or if I was offered to do that, because I really like doing my own thing at my own time, in my own pace, and like I'm not, yeah, I'm not sure. I like doing my own thing, and I like drinking while doing it, and I like there's no rules, no HMS, nothing, just me and whatever stupid ideas I'm working on. Ideas. How will you get crankcase pressure with a large intake open constantly? Did I reply? Resonance. Yeah, resonance. How to start it? There's I didn't mention that in the video, and people have commented about it, but if you look closely at the model, there's a guillotine valve just after the big intake, and that's meant to stay closed until the right RPM is achieved with the small pumper carb and reed intake, and then open. So that's how. If you've been following my channel for since a year back or so, maybe 2, I did actually start the old SPX engine, the one I brought to Bonneville. I removed the rotary valve and it started without an intake valve. So probably the carb worked as kind of a valve there, but it could start and it would rev, but there was this point where there's always a point before the power band, where the pipe, the resonance is working completely against everything happening in the rest of the engine, and then it wouldn't rev any further. So I need a reed valve to get past that point at least. How do you control the CVT to hold a constant RPM? Simple really. If you watch my videos of the new bike or earlier videos, there's the engine is moving, there's a variator on the engine and a fixed pulley in the rear on the jack shaft, and the engine, as the variator expands, the engine moves towards that fixed pulley, and there's spring tension holding the engine back. And how I'm going to control it electronically is with some kind of a linear actuator or air pressure controlled air spring, and control that spring tension continuously while it's running with RPM feedback to just keep it at the right RPM all the time. Peak power RPM all the time, automatically. Nitromethane contains nitric and sulfuric acid. All parts that come in contact with that fuel must be plated nickel silicon carbide. Can't run the carburetor with the mono propellant. Can't stop engine from running. No, nitromethane does not contain nitric acid nor sulfuric acid. Nitromethane exhaust will contain some nitric acid fumes. There's no sulfuric there though, and you won't have to coat everything in nickel silicon carbide. Like nickel plated is fine, bare aluminium is fine. You have to be very careful with strong alkaline substances. So if you've cleaned the aluminium with some like lye or something to etch it before for cleaning, you need to make sure there's no residue of that stuff, because it will create salts, explosive salts with the nitro, with the added nitrogen there. But yeah, no, I've been running, or I did a lot of testing earlier and had no problems with that stuff. But you have to purge the system, because even with the methanol and the water that gets sucked in, there's a lot of corrosion. With nitromethane, there's also that nitric acid residue going on, and that causes a lot of corrosion. So you gotta purge the system. But it's not as dangerous or bad as people will have it to be. Have you ever thought about writing? So Boa Sruis asks, have you ever thought about writing a book just like Graham Bell, or on your innovations such as the 100% bore exhaust port, open intake? Well, like the 100% bore exhaust port, that's kind of my idea. The open intake, or wide open, always open intake, that's been tried. I know there's a Modena, Italian company I think, or French, no, Italian. They have a working engine with reeds that hinge away at high RPM. So Fritz Overmars, I think he collaborated or developed the system with them, and he's where I got the idea from. And yeah, so, and I don't know, I'm not that knowledgeable. I'm really interested, I'm really focused on the two-stroke stuff. I've been focused on two-stroke stuff and the theory and the really nerdy bits of two-stroke tech for years. But I'm not sure if I'm there's a lot of people out there that has a lot more experience and are much more knowledgeable, or have more knowledge about this than I do. I'm just the only one making YouTube videos about it, so I don't know. I don't think I'm not. Maybe in 40 years I'll write a book about the dead engine thing called two strokes. How about direct injection? Matthew Boonen. How about direct injection into the cylinder? That's a great idea. I don't really need it with my constant RPM thing, as I've mentioned, and also it's difficult to do for something like me in a garage. There's kind of a really specialized parts and stuff that would be too expensive or too difficult to make. I think I haven't researched it too much because I don't think I need it for my application. Have you decided to use a steel liner yet? until you get the cylinder design completed, then send out to get the final barrel chromed. And I know there's a lot of replies here about I'm doing it myself, and like I've only done one test and it was successful. The only problem was there was some porosity in the bore, which might not be a problem, but also I used hexagonal boron nitride, which is probably too soft. It's softer than cast iron. I will try to run it and see how it behaves, but it's probably too soft. Now I've mixed in some silicon carbide also, so now I'm actually running something very similar to I can't remember the name, but there's some proprietary, not Nicosil, but some other brand names, and I think they are using like silicon carbide and the hexagonal boron nitride as a dry lubricant. I should have used cubic boron nitride, but that can be like almost as hard as diamond, and I would have had a really hard time honing it. Yeah. So, but I might send out some cylinders for plating if I run out of time, but I really want to master it myself, and I think I can now, because the only problem was that I should have used silicon carbide versus the hexagonal boron nitride, because the plating was perfect, nothing wrong with it. I did it, and I will keep on doing it. So I've replied to this just before I started the video, but there's Nick is a suggestion, like saying we should get just do away with the air intake system completely and replace it with the liquid oxygen injection. The problem with liquid oxygen, if you look, like, say you've got the system sorted, you've got that big tank there, and you have compressed it to, like, you can inject liquid oxygen. The problem is that pure oxygen will react violently with anything that can, like, if anything is hot, if there's a tiny little speck that's glowing, if the spark plug is still hot, even if the combustion chamber is slightly hot, it will just combust immediately. So you will just create like a detonation machine that will kill itself immediately. How about a Patreon live stream now in a while? And you could even post the live stream here on YouTube when done. Yeah, like a live stream would be cool, but my internet is so slow. Like the down speed is okay, the up speed is like 800 kilobits. Can't do live streaming here. I can't upload. I'm uploading with my data plan on the phone, because like a 30-minute video takes at least 24 hours to upload. Put injector before reed cage. The injectors are not meant for the reed intake. It's for the wide open intake that takes over for the reed intake at high RPM. To no intake valve, would the intake need to have a massively long velocity stack? Yep. And look at the model, there's a massively long intake stack. Not that long, because it's supposed to be run at 19,000 RPM. Cool, new plans. Why do you change back to reed valve again? Do you think that rotary inlet has the least... don't you think that the rotary inlet has the least amount of resistance? I'm not changing back to reed valve. I do think that rotary inlet is the best if you need to choose between piston port or reed valve or rotary. But even better, I think, for my application, where it only has to operate in a very narrow RPM range, is the wide open intake that is tuned. Because you can't really tune an intake for if you want to run through a register or through a wide range of RPM, because then it will be out of tune a lot of the time. You could like use a variable intake and even a variable exhaust. That's something that would be really cool to play with, but for my application, not needed. Does detonation happen due to compression ratio, or is it the high PSI that promotes detonation? I'm not quite sure if I understand the question here, because like the compression ratio will cause high PSI, but there's a lot of things that can cause detonation. But it's yeah, it's basically too high of a compression ratio, too tight of a stinger, which will lead to higher dynamic compression and more heat, too much heat, bad, like not enough turbulence to get the flame, moving fast enough. Like more turbulence, you will ignite more parts of the mixture faster. So there's a lot of things going on that will cause detonation. But too high of a temperature, too high pressure, which leads to too high temperature, hot spots, bad geometry, which makes, like, say if you have the spark plug at one edge of the combustion chamber, then you will ignite at that side, and there's a lot of time for the unburnt fuel at the other end to heat up and then ignite before that flame front hits it, and then you will have two colliding flame fronts and detonation. I'm not sure if you will be able to start the engine with an ignition timing set to 19,000 RPM. Won't it be way too early and even have a chance to fire backwards? And then Tom Dish, so that was Dr. Zoidberg. Tom Dish says it's a misconception that high RPM engines need a lot of spark advance. Go-kart engines that run up to 18,000 RPM or more can be easily started with a direct drive just by push starting. It is actually better to have an ignition that does some spark retard at high RPM. Yeah, in the two-stroke you have to retard the spark because of the higher velocity, more turbulence, and the flame, like the flame front, moves faster. So you can ignite it later. So you retard the timing as you get up in the RPM range. So I'm planning to run, that might be a bit too high, we'll find out, around 15 degrees before, like, so spark starts around 15 degrees before top dead center. Might have to retard it more, down to 10, we'll see. I know there's a lot of comments about this. Why not use two injectors and let them fire after each other? So the EFI unit sees half the RPM as it's really running compared to what it's really running. That's a great idea, and I think KTM uses that kind of setup in their EFI off-road bikes, MX bikes. But as I said earlier, I don't really need that kind of control over this. Because of the, like, I don't care about emissions, and I'm only running at 1 RPM point. So continuous injection into the crankcase will work perfectly for me, I think. What is the speed you are trying to break? Well, at least 90 miles per hour, because that's the record. Are you sure you need 19,000 RPMs? Yeah, to get the power I want, I need to do that, because, like, if you want to make more power at lower RPM, you will need to create higher brake mean effective pressure. And in my engine now, as it's designed and what I'm simulating it to be, it's up there at like 13 in brake mean effective pressure, and that's like, you can't really go very much higher than that. That's difficult. So look at it this way: I'm creating the same amount of torque as my old engine. I'm just creating that torque at much higher RPM. So that's where the power is coming from. So like an electronically controlled version of Bosch K-Jet or CIS. Yep. Dirk Novit says using a no-style fogger for fuel. This is like the methanol and water injection thing, is the same thing. Smart move. Not only will you be able to adjust fuel flow from the pump, you could quickly change jets. Good point. Drill into the main flow cavity and tap it for jet type. For the jet type you normally have around, just an ID. That's a great idea. So instead of buying a lot of different jets, I could just like use a restrictor before the jet and like tap that and have that have like a swappable normal main jet thing going on. Great idea. I think that continuous, that one guy from there is saying, I think that continuous injection by pressure control is probably not going to give you enough flow range. I think you should still look towards using injectors. Maybe try PWM on them or using 2 or more different size injectors. Good point if I needed the control, but I don't. I just need to get it right and forget it. How about, or what about using a Tesla valve? No reads, no restriction in one direction, but resistance in the opposite. Just a suggestion. I see your point, and it's a good suggestion, but for a Tesla valve to be effective, it will cause a lot of restriction in the flow direction here, and I don't need it because the intake is tuned, it's in resonance with the rest of the system, so like it pushes the right way when it's supposed to push that way, and it doesn't push too much the other way, like the pulses are moving in sync with the rest of the system. Is it the time between the signal to open the injector and the injector actually opening that is too slow, or can't it pulse fast enough? That's sorry for the dumb question. No, that's a good question. The thing is, an injector needs some time to, like, from closed to open, to be fully open, typically in the 0.8, 0.9 millisecond range, and also it needs some time to go from open to closed, typically in the same range. Now, a two-stroke engine at 19,000 RPM, like one cycle takes about 3 milliseconds, and now you're using up like half of that to just open and close the injector, and then so basically you have 1.5 milliseconds to deliver mixture. But if you want the control you need, if you want to inject mixture that happens or that ends up in the combustion chamber and not just randomly around in the crankcase, you need to inject while the transfers are open. And then you maybe have half the time of the half the time you had, so now there's no time. You could run really big injectors, that would probably work in my setup, but I'm not going for, like, I don't need the complexity of that kind of a system. I just need, like, the continuous injection should work perfectly. Okay, there's a lot more comments. I'll read through them, but I think this video will it's starting to get long, too long maybe, so I'll just end it there. And thank you for all the comments. Thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for believing in me and my but my crazy concepts. Thank you. See you next time for a real video.